party JavaScript library. Okay, just take some notes for this. Put a subheading called as state management. State management. Through state management process, it allows to allocate memory. It allows to allocate memory which is accessible across the requests, comma. The state management can be managed. The state management can be managed between the client and server side. Next line. React can manage server side rendering. React can manage server side rendering and state by using a full stack environment, designed using frameworks like Next.js. So Next.js is just a framework again, as like your React.js, AngularJS, Backbone.js, Knockout.js. Next.js is also one of the framework. Okay, next, put a subheading called as hooks. A hook is a special feature or function. Which lets you hook into the React features like state, lifecycle, and context. Without using class components. Next, put a note. Earlier, within brackets, before React 16.5, people used, sorry, not people, we can say developers used to go for class components. only to implement state management. Only to implement state management. Okay, full stop. Next line. React can manage state within client side using various hooks. Using various hooks. Following are some of predefined hooks being supported in React. Have a copy of this. So this is hooks are the most important concept in your functional components, guys. So put some extra attention here. Okay, I have some questions here. Can you explain what are the new topics introduced on new version release? Lakshmi, like if I talk about, if you see one thing, what I can say is in React 19, there is a support of state management within your server side. At the same time, React Native is also being supported. I mean, instead of listing out, what actually I do is in the topic, when I'm discussing in the topic, I can say that, okay, this is there in the previous version and this is there in the new version. Because if I just only talk about the only new versions which are introduced in your 19.9, 19.1, so you may not catch that what are the new features are there. So that is the reason when I'm discussing about the topic, at that time I'll be discussing about what is there earlier and what is new been introduced. Maybe at the ending of your React, at that time I can say that, okay, what are the list of only the new topics? That will be more easy for you to understand. Clear, ma'am? Next, Pradeep, Redux library is only using for the state management. Yes, Pradeep. When you go with the Redux, right? A lot of people think that Redux is the library, which is, I mean, most of the people know that Redux is the library to implement the state management. But in order to implement the state management using Redux, it is not only for the React. If you go with the Redux library, right? So there is something called as Redux.js. Okay, when you go with this Redux.js, what actually it is saying? It is a JavaScript library for predictable and maintainable global state management. It never said that it is only for the React.js. Okay, Redux never mentioned that AMP can be only used in your React.js. For example, in your JavaScript. Okay, if at all I have to manage a state here, I'm clicking one thing. You know, I mean, hope everybody understood what I mean by state. State, for example, I have one of the page. I have given some ID password. I clicked on this. It is taking me to the product details. Now I need to know that who is the person who has managed here. Now, when I'm going from one page to another, for example, this is the classroom I'm sitting here. I have logged in here. I have given my ID credentials. They ask me to go to the second room. When I'm going to the second room, they need to know that what is the state I'm carrying. My details are the state. Now, when I'm transferring from one page to another, one component to another, you need to know what actually the details are, what selection user has done, what properties user has. So that is what we call it as a state. Okay, now that state management, how you're going to do that? By default, JavaScript is not providing anything. I'm saying about JavaScript, not React. JavaScript is not having any features of doing the state management. If at all you have to do, you'll be using the local storage or session storage concepts in your HTML5. Okay, now if at all you have to implement the state management in your web application, you can directly go with the Redux. No need of going with the React. So this Redux also can be used inside your React.js. Are we clear? So that's a very good interview question. People will ask you, do you have an idea of Redux? And again, when you go into the resume, right? When you're going into the profile, you can say that client-side technologies, React.js, comma, Redux is also one of the JavaScript library, you can say. People say that, for example, state management. Do you add state management inside? Or else, for example, hooks. Do you add hooks inside your resume? No, because hooks is already part of React.js. Now, when I say that I know React.js, you already know the hooks concept also. Hooks is a concept. But when I say React.js, doesn't mean that you are already expertise on the Redux. React is different, Redux is different. We can use Redux state management library inside the React also. Without using React also, I can use the Redux inside your JavaScript web application here. Now, I mean to say, for example, I say, when I say web application, in order to develop a web application, what are the technologies I needed? I needed JavaScript. Okay, this is a first one, which is a web app being built using what technologies? JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. I can build a JavaScript web application, right? Now I may go with web app being built using React.js. Okay, I can say web app being built using Angular here. Now these all are three individual web applications. Now here, can I make use of the Redux? Can I make use of the Redux? Yes, that is what I said. You can make use of the Redux here in order to implement the state management. Can I use Redux here? Yes, in order to implement the state management. Can I use Redux here? Yes, in order to make use of the state management. Angular also gives the state management. You know, like when I go with the React.js, so can't I use the state management without Redux? Yes, get context to the API using which we can do that. But still, if you want to depend upon the third-party library, we can still make use of the Redux. So Redux is not having any dependency with your React.js. It is not a predefined feature of your React.js. It's a simple third-party JavaScript library. Okay, hope I'm clear with your question. Who asked this? Pradeep, you asked this. Next, use layout effect is remain to add. I mean, there here, Shubhangi, I have not said that these are the only what do you say? Only components or only hooks we have. There are lots of things we have. Use layout effect we have. Use effect we have. So there are lots of hooks we have. That is the reason I just simply added as ETC. Question. Yes. Okay. Is everyone clear with the state management now? Everyone, right? That's good. Okay. So these are the different ways we could able to implement. Now, when you say that in your React, how you're going to make use of the state management, we can use this guy. Okay. We can use the hooks we can use the class components, we can use the third-party Redux. But the best way to use is the second one, which is your use state hook. Okay. Next, put a subheading called as use state hook. So what do you mean by hook, guys? Let us understand this. What do you mean by hook? What do you mean by a hook? I mean, in an English keyword, in an English language, what do you mean by hook? Meaning, hook is something called as like linking something to this, holding something, we can say. Okay. So here, what happens is, what do you mean by hook? If you really understand in the layman's language, in your English language, right? What do you mean by hook's concept is, for example, React is one of the application. Assume like there is a container where you are developing the web application. There is a new feature which has to be injected. So what you say, there is some new feature, we just hook to this container. So you're injecting this new feature to the existing web application so that within the web app, you can start making use of this feature. Are we clear? So hooking is existing web application. You just keep on adding multiple hooks in order to use all the services within the web application. Now, when I say unhook, implies I couldn't able to make use of that service. Okay, that is how simple hook's meaning is. Hook is something called as a predefined service. We can call it as predefined function. We can call it as that is just hooking to the existing component or existing web application so that it can start making use of that service or function within that particular components. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are lots of hooks here. Among that, use state is one of the hook. Okay, put a subheading called as use state hook. It is one of the predefined hook being supported in React.js, which is used to handle local state of any component. Local state of any component. So let me create an example for this. Hooks is the folder what I created. I'm creating a new file and I say that use state hooks.js x. Okay, under this, I say a function use state hooks. And I will simply say return like this. Okay, and so anytime you're creating a new component, first of all, you just create the sample example, sample message, and see how the will do. They create a complete component, they write the complete logic. If there is any issue, they're having a question like whether the component is initially rendering or not. So the best way is let us create a sample hook, sample component. Let us see how that is getting rendered. Now I say export, and this is the component. Now how you're going to make use of this component? I'm going to app.jsx. Again, I'm commenting this guy and I say this is the use state hook what we have. And how you're going to import this? So you say import use state hooks from /components. Under that, hooks is the folder. Under that, use state hooks. Okay, now I save this guy. Let us see whether it is getting rendered or not. You see, hooks are about to get loaded. So your component got rendered fine. Now on the top, now you start adding the logic for this. Okay, now how you're going to create a hook here? The simple steps what we have is, object iterator. Yeah, in order to do this guy, I say, I'll tell you what are the steps here. Const username, comma set username. Okay, this is how it is. Now, once I reload the page, it is saying that username is so and so. Are we clear? A very simple application where it is taking some username is equal to so and so, and I'm going to show the data back onto the page. Okay, in order to do this, what actually I'm using is I'm using a hook, something called as use state. And where is this hook is coming from? From the React library. As we know, anytime we want to make use of the React, two main JavaScript files which are being supported. One is react.js and another is react-dom.js. When this -dom.js is going to come, when we want to do something called as, come on, virtual DOM. Anytime you're going to do some DOM operations and all, then you're going to come with the virtual DOM. And this use state is the hook which is being supported from your React itself. So how you're going to make use of this hooks here? So in order to maintain this hooks here, the simple steps here. The first step is, I want to make use of the use state. So how you're going to do this? First of all, import the hook from React. Okay, how you're going to do that? I say import something called as use state from React. Okay, the second one. What is the second step here? The second step is we have to create a const with constant with the state name and the method to set the state value. Okay, comma, assign to use state hook with default value. Okay, example, we say const, I say country name, comma, set country name is equal to use state. And what is the default value? The default value is India, something like this. Okay, so this is the second step. I think the third step is make use of the state value. That's it. Make use of state value within markup country name. Done, everyone? Okay, let me show you once again what actually I have to make use. Anytime you have to make use of the use state hook. What is the very first step I need to do? I need to say import, because this is the use state from the React, because use state is one of the predefined service or hook which is being provided from your React library or React node module. Okay, on the top, anytime you want to make use of the, why this red line is coming, it is saying that boss, we have used this use state, but it is not being used. You see, I just imported, but have not used this. So how you're going to create a state variable? Anytime you want to create a state variable, either you can say var or you can say something called as const. Okay, this const guy is always an array. Array of two values. The first value is what is the name of your state? I say country name is my state variable name. I want to store country name. I want to store username. I want to store age. I want to store gender. Every individual guy will become a constant with that particular variable name. And the second thing is callback method, the method using which you will set the values. So I will say set, I will say country name is equal to, I'm going to say use state is a predefined hook. Now this use state has to come with the default value. What is the default value you want to assign it to the country name? Okay, so how I'm going to do this? I say username is equal to something called as user state is equal to Mr. Raj. Now, what is the default, sorry, country name, right? I say something called India. Now, this is the value which will be assigned to the state variable called as country name by default. If you want to make sure it's an empty by default, you can do this. Otherwise, you can assign the default value for this. Now, if you say, what is the state variable? If I say var CNAME is equal to something called as China. Now, CNAME is a variable inside your component, whereas country name is a state variable within the component. Are we clear? So the difference between these two is this is a country name is a state variable, CNAME is a normal variable which is being used. Now, what is the difference here? Let us say I say first country. I will say how you're going to bind this data. I say something called as country name. Now, the second thing is I say some B tag. This is the first country. I say second one. I say CNAME. Okay, first country and second country, I would like to bind it on the page. Could I able to get this guy, both of them? Could I able to get the both of them? Yes, then what is the difference, boss? If I'm going with the state management and if I'm going with a normal variable, what is the difference I'm getting this? So the difference when you get is whenever you are changing the state variable data, this is by default, top to bottom. I know what you mean by country name. It is India. I know what you mean by CNAME, China. In future, if you update the CNAME, the component will not be getting updated. Okay, in future, if I update the CNAME, I am updating the CNAME to something called from China to something called as Japan. It is not going to update. But if I have to update this country name, it is possible. Whenever you update the state management value, it will automatically re-render the component and it is going to update this country name value here. Okay, let us show you the example. Now I say, for example, okay, one more thing. First of all, understand the syntax. Do you understand the syntax here? Understanding this guy is very important. For example, I'm saying that const array of two values and I'm assigning this. Are you getting any confusion with this? Everyone so clear? For example, if I write something like this, where or else, yeah, I say const username, comma, something called as user age is equal to array of Mr. Raj and comma, user age is 20. Now, what is the value of username? What is the value of user age? 20. We already know this, right? Serialization and deserialization, we already discussed in case of your ECMA. Under your ECMA, this is the concept what we have is anytime you want to assign this value, this will be automatically assigned to the first variable. Okay, the second value will be automatically assigned to the second variable. Okay, now in the same way, what actually happens is the same guy, if I say a function, okay, do job is one of the method, do something, and it is going to return an array, something called as Krish, comma, something called as 30. Now, the same statement, if I add it in this way, this is going to be something called as do job. Can I do this? And it is taking some default param value. I say default val, it could be some anything I can pass. Are you getting this now? Now, instead of directly assigning an array, I am assigning a function to this. That function internally will be returning these values. Isn't it? Here I have hard coded these values directly. Instead of this, I am giving a function to this guy now. Okay, instead of assigning these values directly, I'm giving the function. The same thing is happening over here also. Use state is a function. Okay, what this use state might be, the use state might be something like this. Use state with default value. Okay, it is going to have some logic here and it is going to return an array with two values. And that values will be assigned to the country name. Second value will be assigned to the set country name. Okay, that is what this guy means. Are you clear with the syntax? Everyone online, why hooks are introduced and what is the wrong with class components? What is the wrong with the class? When you go with the class, obviously, again, you will need to go with something called as constructors. Okay, again, for the class, you're going to have some this operators, etc. and all. But when you go with the function is a normal definition of a function. And another thing is, when you say a component, the component can be used any number of times. Then why the reason we go with the class? The main intention of going with the class is you create one template structure that can be repeated multiple times by creating multiple objects. But here, are we creating objects here? No, it's a component we are using, right? Why the necessity of going to the class in that case? Okay, we are not saying that there is a problem with the component. Why unnecessarily we go with the components just to make use of the state component? Oh, sorry, just to make use of the state feature. Am I clear, Sayed? And what we call const. Okay, hope you are clear now, Rajeshri. Bikram, country name is a state. No, country name is a state variable, we can say. It's not a state, it is a variable which has been stored inside the state. Why we need to give second value in the array, like country name? That is the method I will be discussing in the tomorrow's class. This is the method through which you're going to change this guy. Okay, I'm going to discuss on this. Second value is not available in line number 72. Second value in, if you see here, use state. Okay, for example, when I'm giving this guy, what is the first value? This value is been assigned to this. Second value will be assigned to the second guy, right? So here, this method will be returning an array that will be having the second value. Anyway, tomorrow I'll be discussing about this first guy is the state variable. Second guy is not a variable. That is the method which is used to change the state variable. Okay, we'll be discussing in the tomorrow's class, guys. Let's pause it for today. We'll meet again back on tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye for today.